Welcome back. This is Chris Carter. This is where things get really exciting. If you need to have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or something to really get your concentration on, pause this video, go get yourself whatever you need, and then come back and put your thinking cap on. Okay. Now I'm going to explain why you end up with mud sometimes. I did tell you I'd talk about mud. So I asked a lot of questions in the last lesson, and I wanted you to think about it and take a look and see if you could figure it out for yourself. And maybe you did, but maybe you didn't. So I will explain, and I'll go slowly, and I'll probably repeat myself several times because everyone learns things differently, and everyone understands concepts in, there are like 7 different ways that people actually process learning. So I will attempt to share this in a number of ways. And if you don't get it, please contact me because I can always explain it in another way. So in the last lesson, you mixed different reds. You mixed a warm red and a cool blue, and you mixed a cool red and a warm blue. And you got very different results. When you mixed the cool red and the warm blue, you got some pretty nice purples or violets. And when you mixed the warm red with the cool blue, your results were not quite so purple. And this is why. This is the cool red. This is an alizarin crimson. And this is an ultramarine blue. Okay, so I call that a warm blue. It is the blue closest to red on the color wheel. And this is where those colors are on the color wheel. You'll see that the blue is very close to where the purple that we're trying to achieve is. And here's the yellow, here's the blue, here's the red. The ultramarine blue is the blue that's the furthest away from what we call pure blue that doesn't exist. And it's the closest to the red. Blue will reflect wavelengths that our eye interprets in different ways. It's going to reflect the wavelengths that are close to it. So you're going to get mostly blue, you're going to get some purple, and going this direction, you're going to get some green, okay? Now, because yellow's way up here, you're not going to get a lot of green, a little bit of green. You're going to get a fair amount of purple because look at how close it is to purple. And of course, you're going to get blue. Now the red, the cool red, is going to reflect mostly red. It's going to, because it's somewhat close to purple, it's going to reflect a fair amount that reads purple. And because it's pretty far away from yellow, it's only going to reflect a little bit of orange. Okay? So, now listen carefully. When we mix the pigments, blue and red, remember, think of particles of sand. No matter how much we grind them up and mix them together, the particles, we might crush the particles and make them smaller so that they sit next to each other a little bit closer. But they're never going to melt into each other and make a whole new particle that reflects a specific color. No, that's not going to happen. What it is that these particles are reflecting other light that cancels out the wavelengths of the light that's being reflected by the particles right next to it. So if you have a blue particle next to a red particle, they're all reflecting just as they normally do. They just do what they do. So what's going to happen is that the little bit of, what's happening over here? The little bit of green that's over there is going to knock out some of the red. The little bit of orange that's over here is going to knock out some of the blue. Okay? Now there's very little yellow in either one of them. Okay? So hardly any purple is going to get knocked out. But the purple that's in the blue and the purple that's in the red really isn't going to get knocked out at all. It's this tiny, tiny bit of yellow that might, you've got a bit in the orange and a bit in the green, but that's negligible really because it's so far away. Doesn't knock out any of the purple. So what do we see? We see purple. And depending on how much we mix, like if we put a whole lot of red in, the cool red, then there's not going to be enough of this little bit of green to knock out a huge amount of the red. So you're going to get a red violet. You're going to get a purple or a violet that leans toward being red. If you use more blue, then you have a whole lot more green in your pile that cancels out more of the red. But the purple's not being canceled out. So what do you end up with? You end up with a blue violet or a blue purple. Okay? And that's why you get beautiful purples, violets, lavenders when you mix a blue that's really close to red, and ultramarine blue is the blue that's closest to red on the color wheel. So that's always a good go-to. Alizarin crimson is a very cool red, and it's always a good red to go to if you want beautiful purples and lavenders and violets. Okay? So there are more choices in the reds with the permanent rose and the magentas and things like that to vary the kinds of purples you want. But as long as you pick a cool red that's close to this, and you have a blue, now actually you do have a lot of options with blue if you're using an alizarin. You can use almost any of the blues if you use an alizarin. The big trouble comes when you go to a cadmium red or a warm red. Are you getting why? Here is where these colors lie on the color wheel. Okay, this is a cadmium red light, and this is a phthalo blue. And look at what you have. You get really brown, kind of murky things. These are a nice color because you haven't mucked it up too much. But this is where they are on the color wheel. Look, this is further away from purple. All right, but it's still in the ballpark. Look at how far away from purple the cadmium red light is. That is almost up to the yellow. That has so much yellow in it that it knocks out a good amount of the purple that you have in your blue. Okay? You have hardly any purple in your cadmium red because it's so far up. It's reflecting hardly any waves that could be interpreted as purple. Whereas with your alizarin, there's a lot of purple and very little yellow. So here you have a whole lot of yellow to knock out whatever purple might be reflecting from your blue. And look, see the two blues? Okay, so there's a lot more purple and less yellow in your ultramarine blue. There's more yellow and less purple in your phthalo blue, okay? So more yellow knocks out purple. What's the complement of yellow? It's purple. And when I mean knock it out, what happens is when a light wave is absorbed, it gets transformed into, I think it's called thermal energy. It's transformed into heat. Okay, it is no longer light. You can never get it back as light. So it's gone, and that's where we come into mud. Okay, let's say you've mixed these up and you think, oh my goodness, what am I doing? I want purple. Red and blue make purple, but this isn't purple, so I'm going to pull out another pigment from my box of pigments and I'll add something else. I'll add another blue. And so you just keep adding things to it, and what are you doing? You are adding pigment particles that keep canceling out the light of other particles. And you end up with something that gets drearier and drearier and drearier because you keep canceling out the light that's being reflected by the other particles until there's not much left. And that's why when you mix your three primaries, your yellow, your red, and your blue together, ultimately, like the perfect mix would give you black. It would cancel everything out, or certainly give you a charcoal gray. Why? Because you've canceled out all the reflected light waves that reflect color to your eye. So we call it mud because it's dreary and lifeless. But you don't have to make mud. Keep your mixing simple and think of what you're doing with it. The key is all you have to do is think of where does that pigment lie on my color wheel, and what's happening with that little particle. How much blue is it reflecting? How much purple is it reflecting? How much orange is it reflecting? Or if it's a green pigment, all right, what's on either side of the green? It's going to be reflecting wavelengths that read mostly as green. It's going to reflect some that reflect and read as yellow, and some that reflect and read as blue. And you can go all the way around the color wheel and know what it's going to do because of where it's located. Is that green viridian, for example? In the next lesson, you're going to see that even though you can't make a nice purple with cadmium red and phthalo blue, you can make a lovely purple with viridian green and alizarin crimson. So imagine that. Green and red, aren't they complementary colors? Aren't they supposed to negate each other and give you gray or a neutral? Well, they can, depending, but you'll see for yourself that you can mix viridian with alizarin and end up with some lovely violets. So stay tuned.